further ado, let's bring in Joseph Duarte of the Houston Chronicle, who we'd like to thank him for taking the time out of his day, his busy day, and joining us on this episode of Pawd Jama.
Well, I
Joseph, how are you, sir?
Appreciate you guys having me on. I think I'm in Dayon's living room because I watch the crew once in a while, and I think I put his background. So I'm borrowing the crib for a few minutes here.
That's the first thing I thought about. Yeah, me too.
You guys are the original OG media on NIL deal, so I need to get in on that action. And I've had Star Pizza, it's some good pizza. So I'm glad Mike and the gang over there have been able to help y'all out.
So what are your thoughts, JD? When did you first hear rumblings of this?
Let me take you through. Last night we were at an event. They had the Cougar Summer Tour in Webster, and if you saw Chris Pezman there, and you saw him shaking hands, working the room, the energy, the talking about the future, this guy had no idea that this was coming this soon. And then you fast forward about 15 hours, and he's supposed to have an end of the year review meeting with Renew Couture, and it turned into we're parting ways, we're going to make a change. And I'm told they completely blindsided him. But to answer your question, Chris, there had been rumblings. I hadn't heard any type of concrete date. We all knew he had about 2 years left on his deal. I didn't think it'd be this soon. I thought maybe a year out is typically when you see schools maybe decide, hey, we've got this last year here. Let's go ahead and make a change and do it then. So this was a little bit surprising. You don't also see a lot of moves like this made at the start of a summer. Yes. Because of how, that just the logistics of going on a search and who's available. So, yeah, to answer your question, there have been some rumblings, but I hadn't heard anything concrete like some other people had about, maybe something a little bit more imminent. We sat down in Arizona at the Big 12 meetings in early May, and he was pretty upfront about the challenges that this program was going through. Money was the big issue, and, you've documented it. We've talked about it for years about where they stand and how it's going to take a while. But that was his big concern. But I never got to feel like this was a guy who knew that he was maybe on those last, few weeks, last few months of having a job. So, this was a bit of a surprise when I got the phone call that this was going down, mid-afternoon or so.
Where does UH go from here? Do you have a list already of possible candidates, replacements?
That was asked of me. And, at this point, it's not like football coaches where you kind of know who those hot up-and-coming coordinators are, if you're going that route, or if there's a sitting head coach. ADs are a little bit tricky in terms of, who's out there. And I'll say that this job is a lot different than it was a few years ago. You've got the Big 12 that, that not only works for head coaches, but it also works when you're trying to get a top administrator. So, the name that obviously gets thrown out a lot is Jeremiah Dickey. Mm-hmm. He's got some history with the school. He was Mac Rhodes' number 2 guy when Mac was here. He's been at Boise State for several years and has done a great job at Boise State. Now, at the same time, I asked people today, maybe does U of H take the Big 12's approach when they went with Brett Yormark and get an outside-the-box kind of hire? Do you go with somebody who maybe you don't have as much of an athletic background and you go for more of a finance guy, a money guy? Because the way this thing is changing with NIL and then the revenue share that's coming up, it's a lot to take in. And that's why, at the end of the day, does this fall on Chris Pezman? He's the head of the athletic department, but this is going to be a challenging job for anyone that comes in because, Chris, you've said this many times on this podcast that this school has traditionally not done a good job of luring in new money, the fundraising. They seem to have the same small group of people that they go to. And just last night, I was talking to a few people there. I was like, hey, are you guys donors? And they're like, no, we're not really, or we're on a smaller scale. Houston needs to kind of target those type of people and build up that list because right now, it doesn't matter if it's you, Andy, Dayon, or myself taking over that job or somebody who's an actual AD. It's going to be a tough climb until you get some of that money that's coming in with the Big 12 full share in 2 years.
Joseph, let me put this comment up from H-Town Big Dobbs. I guess everybody, do you believe Pez's position should be broken up into 2 positions? One to handle marketing and sponsorship and the other to focus on athletics.
I think you should just give the job to Kelvin Samson. I mean, I think that's what you should. I mean, the way he's talking, think about it. A week ago, we had him on, and I just asked, hey, what were the takeaways from the first year in the Big 12? And Kelvin went into a really deep answer on marketing and the money, and if you don't get on this wagon now, you're going to get left behind. I mean, I joke, but I've seen guys like Mac Brown be considered for an AD job. What Houston doesn't want. Texas went with Perrin a few years ago, and he didn't really have an athletic background, and that didn't turn out real well. And I think Steve Patterson, you could say the same thing. And obviously that's a huge difference in terms of money and everything that's coming in for these two schools. But, I don't think you break it up. I think you need to you get the right guy in place. Then you sort of surround yourself. I like the number 2 guy that they have right now. I think Garrett Classy was a good pickup from Nebraska. He's only been here a short time, so you really haven't been able to see what he's done. They got Alvin Franklin in place. I think that he's a guy, once there's some direction and they figure out in their all-hands meeting of how they're going to look for revenue. And think about it. There's the sponsorship opportunities coming up on the jerseys, on the field. There's all limitless opportunities to get money. So I think you stick with one person, but you do need, like Kelvin said, you need the marketing aspect of it to step it up. I see a lot of schools that are always saying, hey, we're this far away on season ticket sales or that. Houston has not been real transparent with that
Agreed.
stuff. When they announced the Rise campaign, and they said the goal, I don't even know where they're at on the goal right now. Yeah. I don't know.
No, they haven't updated in forever.
They have not updated that. And if you want to generate interest, if you want me to pull out my checkbook and write you a check, I need to see progress. I need to see something tangible that says I'm not just throwing my money away. You have a plan. And I'm not sure if in the end here they've had a plan. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge of the next person who comes in. And I do think it's a one-person job, but I think he's going to have the lieutenants lined up behind him, and they can make this work. They just need direction. And I think that was lost here in the last few years.
This is a great point, guys. Get your thoughts on this. One of my buddies who's an alum, he echoes this. I'm shocked we don't have more company sponsorships. We are a big oil energy city. H-Town has a lot of money, a lot of companies. Where's the connection and synergy between those companies and UH?
Well, Chris, the difference in, say, what Houston can do in terms of that versus Waco or Lubbock, you are a major city. Yes, you have those opportunities, but you're also competing with the other major professional sports in town, and you see that those companies line up to sponsor the Astros. You see those on the wall. You see it at Toyota Center. You see it at the Texans. And I don't know if that's a product of Houston not having reached out and presented, hey, this is why we need you. This is why we think it'll work. Or maybe not until they got into the Big 12 have people said, hey, what's the return? Is it worth us getting involved if we're not going to get much return if they're in the American Athletic? So I think the Big 12 should open those doors. I think you're right. And that whoever asked that question, they need to explore that. I don't think there's one stone that should go unturned if you're at the University of Houston. Look under it. You may find a nickel here, but that's a nickel you didn't have. Then you find $1 and and it all adds up. And I have not seen that, because every time I get into a conversation with a reader or somebody at a game, they bring up the same company. We talk about sponsorships. Oh, it's going to be Landry's. It's going to be Gallery Furniture. You're telling me in 4 million people, those are the only companies you can think of in this town that you can affiliate with Houston? That shows me that somebody has a lack of creativity and going outside the box and finding those people, because you're tapped out where you are right now and you got to find more revenue somewhere else.
And I think that sums up really what Coach Samson said last Thursday. It's really past time, beyond time, for Houston to think outside the box and not leave any stone unturned.
Why do you think basketball is going to Vegas to play that NIL? They've got to get money somewhere to compete. They've got to keep the Terrence Arsenaults and the JoJo Tugglers and those guys, J1 and LJ, from leaving. And by getting that extra $1 million, and if you win it, you get another $2 million, I believe. that sets you up. Hell, they've got somebody donating a 65 Mustang. That's a good step in the right direction.
Right.
I can see Andy and you guys chilling down Washington Avenue with the top down on that thing. I mean, that's something that generates interest.
Yes.
Those are the fun things that people will give money to that we haven't seen that they're starting to do it. So I give them kudos for that. But there needs to be more of that stuff and that outside the box thinking, because you gotta, like the tour we went on with the suites and that party pavilion. Those are steps in the right direction. It's just been a long time coming, and they're way behind when it comes to money.
Joseph, have you heard a timetable for an official announcement of the new AD?
I haven't, Chris. These things, we saw how the Willie stuff went down. I mean, these things can take off. I don't think they're going in blind. I think they have a list that they're going to work off of. And, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe right after the 4th of July holiday, maybe that time span, maybe before Media Day in Vegas, we have a hire. But no, I have not been given an exact timetable. I will bring up one thing, and I think you mentioned, or somebody brought it up, the interim that they named. I thought that was very interesting that they went outside the athletic department and
Yes.
Renee Couture assigned somebody from her inner circle on the other side of campus, because that tells me, one, he's got a finance and money background, so he covers that. But I think this is a message that she's sending, that there's a short leash right now, and she wants to keep the athletic department very close in terms of how things are going to operate. And I don't think this is for the long term, but I think it's just a message that, hey, I'm going to be more hands-on than many people think she already is. So that appointment right there to me was real interesting. And, we'll have to see what happens. Probably not going to be a lot of action for that person. And, we're talking the end of the year with stuff, but I thought that was a huge takeaway from today and how they made the announcement.
Andy, Dayon, you got any questions for JD?
No, Joseph went right into it. I was going to ask him about the interim athletic director, and I think in particular, Joseph, to add on to your point, how that individual comes from that finance background. I think that's a key point, just in terms of what you mentioned was ultimately the deciding factor to move on from Chris Pezman, where when it comes to that revenue aspect, he just wasn't cutting it under Pezman.
I don't know the maybe the pecking order of those around her in terms of like the lieutenants and all the other vice presidents stuff. But I mean, she could have gone probably in a different set of ways, and maybe this just worked out best. I mean, it's a short-term fix. This person, unless they choose that they're going to stay in-house, which I can't see that happening. This is a very short-term fix. So, that was one thing. But, I mean, clearly this is an athletic department. I'm not going to say you need to bring in somebody that just goes over the books and you have to find ways. I mean, does that mean, they're not going to cut sports. They're not going to just start slashing positions and stuff and do all that stuff. Do they have a money problem? Yeah. Does it need to be addressed? Absolutely, especially with the things that are on the horizon. But I just think that there's eventually going to need to be some type of, go each line by line, each sport, and sort of take a wholesale inventory of the athletic department to see where they can make the most gains and make the most progress and the quickest progress.
I got a question. How much influence do maybe coaches like Samson would have on I don't want to say a move like this, but in regards to having strategies or being able to give advice on, like he mentioned recently, about marketing plans and different things maybe that he wasn't hearing, but he always talks about being proactive and looking forward and looking to other things. Influence like him may have on not being stagnant and realizing what's coming in the NIL and the different ways to market and reach this new generation to be able to keep Houston at a high level to really be a powerhouse.
I guarantee you Kelvin Samson is going to be a part of this in some capacity. He may not go to the in-person meetings, but he will have some input. I think Willie Fritz will be a guy that they look at. And I think and you see that happen with the football hires. I mean, you see other coaches, that get involved and they weigh in because one, they may know the person, they may have been in the conference that the person was in, may have had some type of direct affiliation with them. So I think you're absolutely right that you need to lean on people like that, because Kelvin Samson has been around some pretty good ADs, one in particular at Oklahoma, Joe Castiglione, that he talks really high of. So I think there's something to learn by including these coaches, and who knows, I remember a few years ago, Zach Selman, who's at Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. He was a guy that some here at the University of Houston thought would be a really good fit for the job. And, obviously he took Mississippi State's job, but that just shows you that if you have these coaches that have some type of expertise and knowledge, you might as well lean on them, because you don't want to miss out and maybe hire the wrong person, because we see the state of a lot of athletic programs right now across the country. You see what's going on at Arizona. You've seen some of the problems that have gone on at either USC and UCLA and Northwestern. So you gotta really hit this one out of the park, and I think Houston will go down the list, and I think Tillman and Renew have an idea. It's just a matter of who they're going to be able to lure to Cullen Boulevard.
And Connor Diaz is correct in that Zach and Kellen are best friends.
Absolutely, yes.
And Zach was a name I heard this afternoon. But I doubt he's coming here. Oh, let me toss this out, and I know JD, you probably short on time.
I'm good, guys.
All three of y'all, do y'all believe that the next hire will come from a Power 4 program? I'd be kind of surprised.
If it's not Jeremiah Dickey, I think it will come from a Power 5. I think there's only probably a few that they'll look at Power 5, and he makes sense just because of the ties there. I'm not sure if he's a top of the, if he's the favorite right now in the club. I don't think it's there yet. I think he has interest, but I would think if you're Houston, you got to go for somebody at a Power 5. And is that a sitting AD or is that a deputy? That's where you run into, how do you address that? But I mean, there are people that will want to come and live in Houston now that it's in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think I pretty much would echo the same thing that JD said. I think it's best, and you should look from a Power 5, because it's particularly as someone who's being able to see what a Power 5 not only is where it's going, but understand what it takes to succeed. I think someone having to see and being an experience, whatever position that they have, have that experience and knowledge to be able to see it, see how where it is, understand it, and have a vision and a plan for different marketing strategies. Because Houston is a big city. I mean, like you said, just 3 sponsors where you mentioned, when people think about it, that's way more than that. I think Houston in a lot of different ways are comfortable with just kind of being stagnant in many different areas. Status quo. And I think in the potential that they have to really reach that next level, they got to hit out the park with this AD, and they really have to kind of think out of the box in regards to what Houston would normally do and how they would normally operate.
Yeah, I agree 100%, especially considering Pezman, the background, the UH background that he had. Alumni moving on from him, it's going to have to be someone from a Power 5 to really sell on the alumni. And if it's not from a Power 5, then it has to be someone, in my opinion, that's completely outside the box, maybe from another industry. But if it's from an athletic background, I agree with both of you. It has to be from Power 5.
Chris, a key thing I think for those who are listening, that to know about whoever takes this job, they're coming into a situation where, we talk about the money and the budget and where it's at, but facility wise, they're in a really good position. They've got some things that they need to do, maybe baseball, some softball stuff, to track, but major infrastructure, TDCU, the football ops, Guy Fertitta, that's all set. And then you look at the contracts. I don't have every head coach, but of the major ones, Willie's signed through 2028, Kelvin's through 2027, Todd Whitting's through 2026, Ron Huey's got 1 season left. Softball coach is expiring in July, so that will be at the top of the order. They just hired a tennis coach, and then the volleyball coach who's done a great job, David Rare. He's got about, I believe, 4 more years left. So from that standpoint, there isn't a lot that needs to change, but it certainly puts on notice those underperforming sports that, hey, if someone comes in, this may be it for you, and you need to turn it around now, because that's typically what happens when a new AD comes in. They want to put their stamp on things, and since the 2 major revenue sports are sealed, that's where the changes are likely to come.